It is a BYU football game day. Yes, the Cougars are hosting the Oklahoma State Cowboys inside LaVell Edwards Stadium this evening. Should be cold and blustery, but the good news is BYU has another opportunity to push their record to 7-0. What will it take for the Cougars to accomplish that feat? Well, good thing you stopped by. We're talking about all of it right here on Locked On Cougars.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And, of course, a big thank you to all of you once again who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, you get $200 in bonus bets, courtesy of our friends at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to learn more now. Once again, $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet, all courtesy of FanDuel and FanDuel.com. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. BYU and Oklahoma State squaring off tonight inside LaVell Edwards Stadium. Looking forward to this one. I know it's going to be cold. It's probably going to be blustery as of recording of this podcast. The forecast actually shows that the rain should have moved out of the area here along the Wasatch Front by the time the game kicks off. So fingers crossed that the field conditions will be pretty much near prime. Might be a little dewy out there, but the good news is it should not be dumping buckets as BYU women's soccer saw last night. By the way, congratulations on them. Falling behind 3-1 in the second half, and then Ollie Fryer leading them to a 3-3 draw against the Baylor Bears that was delayed. I think that game ended up ending. I'm recording this podcast right after I think it went final. It was 11 o'clock or whatever. So crazy late night for BYU women's soccer, but a big win all the same for them. But can the BYU football program go out and get the job done tonight? Well, they better, because here's the thing. This is a BYU squad, I think, that is fully aware of what they've accomplished to this point, but they are not satisfied and resting on their laurels right now. Obviously, they have surpassed the win total from a season ago overall. They had 5 wins in 2023. They have 6 currently. They had 2 conference wins a season ago. They've already got 3. They got a sterling 3-0 record in the conference right now, whereas Oklahoma State, who was one of the preseason favorites, is coming into this one on the heels of an 0-3 slide. They started the season 3-0. They are 0-3 since then. And obviously they've enjoyed a bye week. And they're also making a change at quarterback coming into this game. Multiple reports out of Stillwater say that Garret Rangel is going to be the starting quarterback for the Cowboys in this game. And that's where I want to start off talking about where I think things could change for BYU in this game, is that Jay Hill, I'm sure he's been anticipating Garret Rangel getting the start for Oklahoma State. And now Jay Hill gets to go out and confuse another young quarterback. Jay Hill loves to disguise coverages, bring blitzes from everywhere, use twists, use stunts, use everything in his arsenal to confuse young quarterbacks and get them to make mistakes. This is a BYU team that has been accused of winning games because of their flukes. They're a fluky team. We've heard that from certain fan bases that are rivals of the Cougars. But here's the other thing about this. You make your own luck. This is a BYU squad that has done a very good job of going out and doing what they need to do to win football games. If the team is going to if the opposing team is going to turn the ball over to you in favorable field position, all you can do is go and gobble up the yards in front of you and score touchdowns. That's what BYU's done against Kansas State. Last week against Arizona, they've gotten the job done no matter how it's come. It still feels like at some point for this BYU squad that they will have a game where they're going to have a hard time turning the ball, getting an opponent to turn the ball over. So getting takeaways for BYU's defense. And that will require the BYU offense in that circumstance to be much more efficient and obviously be able to drive the field and prove they can do that. That could come as soon as tonight. Who knows how it's going to go? But I think this is a BYU squad that is fully intent on continuing to do what it's doing, and that's playing complementary football. And I think a guy like Jay Hill, he's going to be thinking, all right, we got a young quarterback making his first career start. He's coming to the loudest and biggest stadium in the Big 12. Let's make his life an absolute you-know-what. And I can't wait to see how they go about this. I'm expecting corner blitzes, safety blitzes, all-out blitzes, twist stunts. Throw the kitchen sink at this young man. Disguise your man coverages by looking like zone and then morphing into that man concept of the snap. Make it so this kid's head is spinning and he's not sure what he's seeing out there. And when you see the proverbial ghost, maybe he throws one up, you pick it off, return it for 6, or at least set the offense up in favorable field position. Aaron Roderick and his Charges, obviously led by Jake Retzlaff, are going to be more than happy to take up whatever role they have to win this football game. I look at this as BYU is coming into this one fully aware of what's going on out there with the conversations around this football program at 6-0. But I also think they are so good, and they've been so good so far this season, about narrowing in on the here and now. And I think the here and now in this one is there's payback on the mind of the BYU football team. Connor Pace said as much when he joined us earlier this week on the podcast. By the way, if you missed that conversation, great stuff. Timeline on his injury, what he expects from Oklahoma State, what he's doing to help out the BYU offensive line in his pseudo coaching role now that he's on the shelf for a little while with that foot injury. But the bigger point to be made is BYU remembers what happened a season ago. They were 5-6. They went into Stillwater and they played an extremely impressive first half. They were up 24-6 and ended up losing that game in double overtime. Brutal scenes. I will forever have the image of Isaac Rex fumbling that ball and seeing his collegiate career end on such a miserable play. Jake Retzlaff, the starting quarterback that day, saw his starting record go to 0-4. And trust me, the conversations, the chatter, everything around that young man was really negative in the aftermath of that game. And I understand it because BYU suffered a losing season. They missed out on a bowl game. It was a brutal, brutal scene there in Stillwater. BYU's players who played in that game a season ago, and there's a ton of them. There was a ton of continuity from BYU in this one. There's actually quite a bit of continuity, as our good friend Cody Stovall mentioned, for Oklahoma State coming back this season. These two programs are familiar with what happened a year ago, and BYU's got that payback on their mind. They said, okay, we lost in your house down there in Stillwater. You're coming to Provo, and we're going to make it difficult for you guys in this one. And the chess match is going to go back and forth here. I'm looking forward to it. And obviously, there's a lot to be proven by the BYU Cougars when it comes to taking the field tonight. But the biggest thing I want to see, I guess one of my keys to the game, is I want to see a team that's confident. They have been very, very good about playing confident football this year. I don't have any reason to think they won't play that style of football, but it's a game of runs. It's a game of emotion. It flips on a knife's edge, and that ball, it's shaped weirdly, and it bounces in weird ways. I'm looking to see how the Cougars handle their business tonight. Are they going to approach it with a blue-collar mentality and go out there and just rumble through this? If the field conditions aren't great, they put it on the running backs, guys like L.J. Martin, Hinkley Rapati, Sione Aimoa, and the like. Or are you going to play with some flair and some dramatic? You know, let Jake Retzlaff sling it down the field and let Darius Lazar and Chase Roberts dance a little bit. I want to see it all. I want to see a comprehensive game once again from BYU. I thought last week against Arizona, in terms of just evaluating the overall play of all three phases of the game, position group by position group, BYU played their most comprehensive game of the season against the Arizona Wildcats. But there's still much to improve on. Third down conversion percentage in terms of on the defensive side of the football. They are getting carved up on third downs. Speaking of Jay Hill's defense, can they narrow in on that and not allow a kid like Garret Rangel to get comfortable in the pocket back there? You got to make him think he's feeling pressure, he's seeing ghosts, and make life miserable for him. And it will go a long way towards BYU getting the win. But I'm looking forward to it. It's always fun to play on Friday night. Yes, I know that affects high school and the like, but the nice part is with fall break here along the Wasatch Front, a lot of the high school games have already taken place Wednesday and Thursday night. So I'm expecting a sellout, 64,000 plus at full throat when I get out there to LaVell Edwards Stadium, and we'll see how it all goes. Now, there's a bigger conversation to be had as BYU begins the back half of the regular season. They've played 6 games. They got 6 games to go in the regular season. A couple of questions were sent in, as we do on Fridays, typically with our mailbag, that relate to BYU 1984 as compared to 2024. What are the differences? What are the similarities? We're going to dig into that next. I also have my prediction for you guys for tonight's game coming up in just a little bit as well. It's all ahead as we roll on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends, a new friend over at HIMS. Now, many of us out there, you may be struggling with ED, and that's the best part about what HIMS is offering, is they're trying to make this as simple as possible. A lot of us, we've got busy schedules. I can tell you my schedule is packed from sun up to sundown, and the thought of having to travel to go see a doctor for such issues just seems like it's just one extra thing I don't have time for. And you probably are thinking that same thing yourself, but you have ED issues. HIMS is here for you because they are changing men's healthcare by providing you the wide access to affordable sexual health treatment treatments from the comfort of your own home. All of this is done 100% online, so no need for those uncomfortable doctor's visits. You don't have to take time out of your schedule to do it. Just answer a series of questions on their site, and a medical provider will determine the right treatment option for you guys. It prescribes your medication that ships directly to you in discreet packaging for free. And the best part is, with no insurance being needed and one low price, it covers everything from treatments to ongoing care. So start today with our friends over at Hims. Go to hims.com/lockedon for your first free online visit. That's HIMS.com/lockedon for your personalized ED treatment options to get evaluated by the team over there at Hims. Once again, that's hims.com/locked on. Now, for some legalese, the products mentioned are chewable compounded products which are not approved or verified for safety or effectiveness by the FDA. Prescriptions require an online consultation with the healthcare provider who will determine if appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for details and important safety information. Subscription is also required. Price varies based on product and subscription plan as well. But once again, to get started today, we're going to hims.com/locked on. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. All right, let's talk a little bit further about BYU. I had question come in, actually 3 questions of similar variety from our Locked On Cougars Insider group. We'll get to the other questions that were submitted in our weekly mailbag in just a little bit. But Ethan, Nate, and also David send in similar questions. So I'm going to sum it up saying this. Jake, are you seeing similarities between the 1984 national championship team and this team in 2024? That's essentially the gist of all 3 of these questions. They were worded different, had some different caveats in it, but it comes down and boils down essentially that question. Are there similarities to the 84 squad that has that national championship trophy and this 2024 squad? Well, I'll say one similarity is out there is that the door for BYU to win a national championship is open right now. In 1984, it was not out of the realm of possibility a team like BYU could win a national championship. We all saw that unfold. Now, I'm not old enough because I was -3, as I like to say. I was born in 1987, but I have a grandfather and a father who are as engrossed in BYU football as anybody at that point, and they watched BYU win that national title. It was a thrilling time, obviously. And the biggest thing for BYU was if you won all your games, you moved up to the national polls, and teams around you lost, you ended up number 1, and you're ranked number 1, and you're voted national champions. In this day and age, the college football playoff is how they determine the national champion, and we have a 12-team playoff for the first time this year. After BYU won the 1984 title, I'm not breaking any news to anybody I feels like out there. Hopefully I'm not. There were powers that be in college football that said that will never happen again. A team of BYU's caliber, a quote-unquote have-not, what we now call the G5, a G5 team will never win a national championship while we're in charge of the sport. And that was thinking of like the Power 5 level programs at the time. That's why they created the Bowl Alliance back in the 90s. You had the BCS era, obviously this 14 playoff era. All of it was structured so that the haves, the Power 5, now the Power 4, would have the opportunity to win a national championship, whereas the other ones, okay, that's cute, you're here, but you're not winning everything. Since BYU joined the Big 12 Conference, that door literally was shut on them for 39 years, roughly, has been opened back up to the Cougars. Could this season end up the same way it happened in 1984? Yes, it could, but it's going to require a lot more wins because, remember, it's a playoff now. So you have a 12-team playoff, and let's say BYU, they were to run the table here. They go to Arlington at 12-0. They win that. They're 13-0 going into Selection Sunday. They're probably one of the top 4 seeds, and therefore would get a first-round bye into the quarterfinals of this tournament that they're going to have. Now, then you jump in and you have to win multiple games to win a national title at that point. So it's going to require a lot of wins, more wins than BYU had to muster in 1984 to win the national title, but they have the opportunity open to them because they're now members of the Power 5 ranks. Differences. Well, we all know how in 1984 BYU is able to have some magical plays out there. We have not seen a Kyle Morrell flip over the line, dragging down Raphael Cherry from the University of Hawaii yet for this BYU team in 2024. I will also say this. We're halfway through a season. BYU 6-0. They're playing the toughest stretch of games that they're probably going to face all year long coming up in the next 3 games. Oklahoma State tonight, and I get it. Oklahoma State's down on their luck, but still, very tough game, having to travel to UCF. And then, oh, by the way, there's this rivalry game against Utah on November 9th. The next 3 games are critical. If BYU wants to be that contender that many people either A, believe they are, or B, think that they are pretenders that are masquerading as contenders. Well, these next 3 games are going to tell us a lot about this BYU squad. The biggest thing about this BYU team and the perception I get from the outside is that they are a team that is kind of proven like 1984 to be a team that can focus on the here and now. Us in the media, me doing this podcast, what I do in my day job with KSL Sports Zone, you as fans, we can take games 2 and 3 at a time. I mentioned there's a 3-game stretch here coming up that's critical for any and all hopes BYU has. But the team has shown, much like the 84 team, that they focused on the here and now. What do I have to accomplish today to live my dream? Connor Pay has said it. BYU has a stated goal of winning a national championship. Every team seems to have that every single year, but there are 80 some odd teams, it feels like that's a pipe dream for them. It's a reality for BYU at this point. They have to understand that if they can run the table here, even if they drop one along the way, they can still find their way into a playoff and have every opportunity to live that dream and win that national title. But you cannot get too far ahead of yourself. You can't be looking past Oklahoma State tonight. You can't be looking past UCF next week, a bye week, and then the University of Utah, the rivalry game. You have to literally go day by day here. And that's one thing, the more I talk with people around the 84 squad and the more I read about that team, was they were a collection of individuals who came together as a team and literally were able to kind of just filter out all the other fluff and say, what do I need to do today to make myself the best version I can be in terms of winning football games and being the best football team we can be? That's going to prove to be the difference, the difference or the similarity between this 84 and 2024 team. It would be, I'm just saying it right out front, it would be an absolutely magical thing to watch BYU 40 years after their first national title to have an opportunity to make a run at another one. That's still a long ways off, though. There are still 6 games here, 6 Big 12 conference games that BYU has to endure, get themselves wins in, and more importantly, understand that now that they're at the top of the conference, they now got the bullseye on their back, whereas they were a team that's kind of putting bullseyes on other teams and chasing them down earlier on in the season. The back half of the season will tell us a lot about this team. And obviously, if they want to live that dream, that proverbial national championship dream, and hoist a trophy up, well, it starts tonight. Handle your business against Oklahoma State. You lose games like this, well, that dream will fizzle out real quick. And then the dreams of a Big 12 title, college football playoff, that goes all up in smoke very, very quickly. We'll see. I'm really intrigued how this team has handled business to this point, because I get the sense that they are a team that is very good about focusing on the here and now and handling what they need to handle on a daily basis. I think that so long as they continue to keep that focus where it needs to be, they have a good opportunity to make a run, because the schedule, it actually sets up to be decently favorable to BYU. Yes, road trip to UCF is very tough to make it 2 time zones, obviously, to the East Coast to play that game. That's tough. Your arch rival. We all know that BYU and Utah have played some absolute classics. That's going to be a tough one. Kansas has been down on their luck. Arizona State, looks a lot more plucky this season. And Houston, well, that's the regular season finale, and who knows what's happening at that point for both sides. But the dream is alive for BYU. What can you do to accomplish and keep that dream alive today? That's all BYU players need to focus on. I feel like I'm kind of giving them a pep talk, as it were, but that's their job. Us in the media and as fans, we can go out there and talk more about the bigger picture stuff. But the players, if they want to live that dream and have that big picture become a reality, well, go out and do your thing tonight and beat the Oklahoma State Cowboys and then move along to the next step. All right, coming up here in just a minute, we will finish out today's show with more questions from you, our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. They have been really, really good that have come in. We've got some basketball ones, got football related, and we even have a few that are off the cuff. We'll fit in as many as possible in the time remaining that we have right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, if NFL fans, if you're looking to have some fun this NFL season, you get an incredible big return with our friends at FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sportsbook. When you get the hunch in the middle of a game you're watching, you can check out the latest stats, see live play-by-play, and stay up to speed on everything while you're casting bets on the very same page. It's all courtesy of your friends over at FanDuel. I can tell you the app is really simple and easy to use if you want to utilize that feature as well. And more importantly, you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 $25 bet with our friends at FanDuel. That's $200 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet placed with our friends at FanDuel. Go to FanDuel.com to get started today. Once again, that's FanDuel.com to get started today. It's all courtesy, once again, of your friends at FanDuel, as they are America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. I've talked about it a couple of times on today's show. If you're not a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group, I would encourage you guys to join us today. Get everything I'm hearing, the latest I'm hearing on BYU sports, coming to your phone in the form of a text message. It does not get much simpler than that, but if you want to join us today, click the link in the show notes below and join us. You get a 14-day free trial and just $5 a month afterwards to support the podcast and get all inside details I can muster for you guys when it comes to BYU sports. All right, let's finish up today's show with your guys' questions. I threw it out on our Locked On Cougars Insider Group yesterday and said, hey, you can do a mailbag. What questions do you have for us? So let's kind of roll through these and get to them as many as we can in the time remaining. Tyson asked this: what games would be good losses for the remainder of the season? And that's a good topic, kind of coming off what we just talked about. How many could BYU lose and still make the Big 12 championship game? I will say at most, in terms of potential losses, you could absorb 2, and that would depend on which 2 you lose to and how the rest of the conference shakes out. If Iowa State and Texas Tech continue to have perfect runs through the conference, well, guess what? 2 games will cost you, and you will miss out. I think games like tonight are dangerous because this is an Oklahoma State team they're desperate. They could drop to 3-4 tonight and really be wondering, okay, are we really get bowl eligible after they had dreams of making a return trip to the Big 12 title game coming into the season? You could put a lot of seeds of doubt in their mind with a win tonight, speaking of BYU. But conversely, if Oklahoma State wins this game, suddenly they're feeling a lot better about themselves. Hey, we're 4-3. We can make a back half of the season run. Let's do our thing. It's games like that. Obviously, the rivalry game against Utah, it has come down to the final play more often than I would care to really admit. And it's going to be a tough one for BYU to win that one. Even going to UCF next week, BYU has traditionally struggled and they've had to go more than 2 time zones with travel. It's actually kind of borne out across all of college football that 2 and 3 time zone travel, it's a net negative for the team making that long trip. So obviously BYU is going to have to be on their toes to handle that. Let's see other questions here. Morgan says this: how would you rate BYU secondary against Oklahoma State's receivers? I would call both groups elite with some incredible athletes on both sides. Morgan, that's a good point. I would expect the BYU man for man, probably a bit of slight disadvantage against Oklahoma State's overall talent at wide receiver. But let's be honest, what's the more polished unit right now? I would say BYU secondary. They've been very, very good, and they'll be on their toes, obviously, trying to shut down everything Oklahoma State throws at them. And how many a quarterback can make in his first career start? Can you confuse him? Can you pick him off a couple of times? That would go a long way to helping BYU out as well. Other than BYU, who do you think has the best home field advantage in the Big 12? That comes from Tom. Oh, that's a good question. I'm going to say Iowa State because everything I heard at Jack Trice Stadium is that they are absolutely bonkers out there in Ames, Iowa with Iowa State. But, man, I'm trying to think of anything else that would kind of pop off the page at me. Kansas didn't really have it last year when I was there in person. Now with the new stadium, could that change? Maybe so. I do have to give a tip of the cap to the Utes. Come on. Rice Cycle Stadium is a hotbed. We all know that. Any of you who have gone to a game there, you know how crazy it can get up there in Salt Lake City. And then I guess the only other one I would think about off the top of my head might be Kansas State. But even then, oh, no, actually, no. West Virginia. Yeah, Morgantown. I would say the Mountaineer fans. They show up big time. Other questions here. Michael Valentine, are there any new things going on with the men's basketball team? Well, they're trying to get guys eligible. We've heard that rumor out there, and that's obviously been covered in depth by a number of other publications. But the biggest thing for BYU basketball right now is get your guys ready to go for the season. Get them up to speed, keep them healthy, get them in shape, and then hit the ground running when the season begins later this month. Next week, isn't it? That we have the Carroll College game, or is it? I don't remember what the name of that team is that they're playing for the exhibition game, but that's one to pay attention to. Another good one here. What is your projection for the remaining games coming from our good friend Taylor? I'm going to say 4-2. It's maybe a bit conservative on my end, but I just feel like there might be a game or two where BYU doesn't have those turnovers that they have had come to them in droves, and the BYU offense might falter at points. But even at 10-2, you could still find yourself very much playing for everything you've wanted to play for. So that'd be the interesting part about that. Brian also asked this. Also, any thoughts, anything you know about AJ DeBonson and JJ Mandaquit's recent visit? Did we, speaking of BYU, make a positive impression on them? I think that BYU did make a good impression, and the likelihood of them coming to BYU, I have no idea on right now. AJ DeBonsa is going to cash a major hefty NIL check no matter where he goes. And that's a good thing for a young man of his caliber because he's on his way, it appears, to superstardom in basketball. He's going to make a lot of money playing the sport he loves. Jason Mandequit, I think he's a guy that would fit in at BYU quite well. Now, he plays basketball at a very high level, be a fantastic guard to have on the roster for BYU. But to kind of handicap it right now, I got no idea. Now, the one thing that is interesting is the DeBonsa, who said he was going to plan to sign in their late signing window, so coming up next year in 2025 is when he was originally planning on signing. He has moved off that. He has said that he might sign in this early signing window, which begins at the end of November. I think it's November like 30th. If he signs that early window, that might give BYU a fighting chance there. I'm very interested to see what happens with that. Here's a good one off the cuff. Brian asked this. I'm curious how you got your nickname from DJ and PK. Well, so my nickname is Yak, as some of you might know from my radio job working with DJ and PK on the KSL Sports Zone. That nickname comes from one Jakob Poeltl. Remember Jakob Poeltl playing for the Utah Utes? Well, DJ and PK went up to one of his interviews one day, and they were talking with people up there, and they came back and said, "Hey, Jake, your name's Jake. His name is Jakob. Well, it's German, obviously German pronunciation of Jacob. So why are we not calling you Jak, a.k.a. Jake?" So that's where I got it from. It's as simple as that. So you can blame Jakob Poeltl for why I have my nickname. So that's one of the fun things about that. Let's see. Other questions here. Not to look too far into the future, but what are your thoughts on our future at the QB position post Retzlaff? He says, I'm thinking Jake will return next year, but beyond that, barring a transfer, you might look at who we have right now and who do you think steps into that role? I really like Noah Lugo, and I think he would be the next, perhaps, or maybe Bourget, unless he transfers out. You're forgetting one name there, Austin, in this conversation. Actually, two names I should mention. One is already on the roster, McKay Hillstead. Hillstead has proven himself at the Division I level, and BYU brought him in for a reason. Will he ultimately ever be the guy at BYU? Obviously TBD, because that could be Lugo or it could be a Bourget. They can have that opportunity as well. So keep an eye on McKay Hillstead's name and also Enoch Watson. I can tell you the coaches are absolutely in love with that kid. He's currently in the mission field for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. But when he gets home, man, Enoch Watson has got everything it feels like on like the skill sheet list that you would want for a Division I Power 4 level quarterback in droves. There's also other quarterbacks BYU can pursue out there. Obviously, Helaman Kasuga is off the list for BYU. He committed to Texas A&M yesterday as a member of the 2026 class, which is the class after Jake, in theory, would leave BYU. But there are options out there. And obviously the transfer portal will always be something BYU could hit when it comes to bringing their guys in. Let's see. Andrew asked a question. When should we expect an influx of Utah to BYU recruiting flips? A similar question from our good friend Travis. When will the success on the field start to translate to recruiting? Hopefully soon. Maybe it won't flip necessarily straight from Utah to BYU, like we heard from Andrew there. But I look at this as BYU's got to start capitalizing on the recruiting here. You got to start selling guys saying, hey, look at what we're doing. Come be a part of this. You know you want to be a part of it. That's when I think now, I should say, not then. Now is the time for BYU to capitalize on it and really start to press the issue. I'd like to see them do their job and do a good job in recruiting and getting some higher level talent into the program. Let's see. If you had a wish list of a team to play in the playoffs, who would it be? Tyler, personally, I want it to be a Big Ten team. I have this sick fantasy, and I don't proclaim to be any type of Nostradamus. But let's say Boise State's doing their thing. They look like they're probably going to be that G5 representative. They give one spot to the G5, the top team. Why not BYU and Boise State for old time's sake? How about that, Tyler? Would that be a fun enough game? Big Ten wouldn't be bad either, but it kind of be funny to see Boise and BYU playing together in the playoff. It would just kind of be one of those things. But same time, do I really want to see Ashton Genty running against BYU's defense? Maybe not. All right, let's see. Other questions here. If LJ and Hinckley stay healthy, what are the chances we see Sione Moa again this year? That comes from Jason. I still think you see him. I think what he showed against Kansas State, you mentioned that TD running against Kansas State was absolutely incredible. Yes, it was. I think Sione Moa is going to be hard to keep off the field once he's 100% healthy. BYU said they had him available in case of emergency last week. That indicates to me that hopefully tonight he's full go. And I'm not going to lie, Jason, my two guys, I would make my kind of my 1-2 tandem. If I had my druthers at BYU, it'd be LJ and Sione Moa. It's nothing against Hinckley. I think it'd be a great third down back or a third option at running back. But I'd go with Sione Moa and LJ Martin. Let them be your kind of your thunder and lightning combo there. Bryce, is there anyone you're expecting to see a breakout game from? I'd like to see a breakout game from Keelan Marion. Keelan's been a guy that I feel like has been kind of waiting to really break out. And if he really does break out, maybe him or JoJo Phillips. We saw JoJo a little bit in the season opener, remember, against Southern Illinois. One of those two guys. If they can get a third wide receiver, in the case of actually with last week with Parker Kingston getting in the mix, where you push it to 4 guys, can make a really dangerous wide receiving core for BYU. So I want to see like a guy like Keelan Marion. That's who I want to see break out. That'd be cool to see that happen. Obviously, it would be just for him in terms of his work he's been putting in all over the field for BYU. All right, other questions real quick here. I'm going to see how many more I can get through. We got like 15. I'm not going to get through all of these, so I apologize. Let's see. Oh, here's a good one right here. 2 questions from Jesse. Says this, when do we see Kalani get another extension? Is there anything besides money that BYU could do to keep Jay Hill? He should make more too. Money always talks. We all know this. I would say, let's say BYU lives that dream and they go out and make the college football playoff this year. I always think that Kalani Sitake is going to be like, hey, can we renegotiate the contract and get an extension in place? I'm sure BYU will be willing to look at that as well. I think the biggest thing for Jay Hill is just make him feel like he's valued. That's it. Just make him feel like he is a part of the family. And I know he already knows that, speaking of Jay, because he's been very effusive in his praise of how BYU's treated him and his family since he got to Provo. But I think it would be really cool to see them reward that, but making sure that he feels the love out there. That would go a long way to really, I think, changing a lot of the dynamic around BYU football. All right. Yeah, I'm not going to get to all these. Tanner, Megan, man, I got questions up and down the list here. So I apologize. I'm not gonna get to all of them on today's show. If I get some time, maybe later today, I may sit down and like do a special edition, knock out the rest of those questions. If not, all the same, thank you for all of your support of the podcast. It absolutely means the world to me that you guys support it as much as you guys do. I can tell my voice is getting a little bit scratchy. It's one of those points in the season where my voice just starts to go a little bit. So if it sounded a little bit off today, apologies, but I can just kind of feel it. It's getting a little bit weak. So we're going to sign off today. So big thank you as always for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen to the day. And as always, thank you to all of you who are everydayers. Enjoy the game tonight. We'll be back early tomorrow morning with a postcast edition of whatever happens out there at LaVell Edwards Stadium. And of course, as always, this has been the Locked On Cougars podcast.